Hi everyone, my name is Faye. If you're following the 31 days of Halloween, or even if you just like true crime, then make sure to subscribe. Don't forget, a little like goes a really long way, and I'd love to hear in the comments what stories you'd like me to go over. Today's video tells the story of Dennis Rader, or otherwise known as the BTK killer, which in this stands for bind, torture and kill. Dennis was born in 1945 in Pittsburgh in Kansas. He was the oldest of 4 sons and had a pretty normal childhood, and as far as anyone could remember there was never any suspicious things or any weird things that he would do. There was one report that he would hang stray animals, but that was just more hearsay than anything. Dennis was a college dropout, but he joined the US Air Force in the mid-1960s. When he returned, he married his wife Paula in 1971, and in 1974 he began working for the ADT security services. Up until this point in his life, he seemed like a normal guy. He didn't have any odd behaviour other than hanging the stray animals, but again, that was just hearsay and there was never any evidence of that. But on January the 15th, 1974, this all changed. While installing security into a family's home, Dennis strangled to death 4 members of the Otero family. There were 2 parents and two children. As far as I can tell, he did this pretty quickly and left, but not before taking a watch and a radio. At the crime scene, he also left semen and later said that he had sexual pleasure from the killings. It wasn't actually until the family's 15-year-old son returned home that he found the bodies there. This then was an ongoing crime scene investigation for quite a long time after the killings happened. Strangulation and souvenir taking then became like a part of his act of killing. This was just the first time. A few months after his first killing, in April 1974, he was waiting in an apartment for a young woman named Catherine Bright. When Catherine arrived home, Dennis stabbed her and strangled her, and then again took a souvenir from the apartment. Although on this occasion her brother also returned home at the same time. When her brother Kevin walked through the door, Dennis shot him twice, and Kevin actually survived this injury, luckily, and later described Dennis as an average sized guy with bushy moustache and psychotic eyes. In October 1974, 9 months after the initial murder, Dennis placed a letter into a book in the public library. In the letter he confessed the killing of the Otero family, and the letter actually ended up in the local newspaper. In the letter he wrote, "It's hard to control myself. You probably call me psychotic with a sexual perversion hang-up." He then warned that he would strike again and added, "The code words for me will be bind them, torture them, kill them, BTK," which is where the name the BTK killer came from. Dennis didn't strike again for 3 years after this letter came out, and in March of 1977 he tied up and strangled Shirley Vian after locking all her children in the bathroom. In December, he then strangled Nancy Fox in her home and then called the police to report a homicide. And it was almost like he wanted the police to chase him. Not long after calling in the homicide, in January of 1978, Dennis sent a poem to the local newspaper about the Vian killing. He then sent a letter to the local television several weeks later stating that he was responsible for the killing of Vian, Fox and another unknown victim. And in all of this, even though he was sending out all of this evidence to all the authorities, he still managed to keep it on the down low of his normal life. Like, his wife didn't know, none of his neighbours knew that he was this secret killer. His family had no suspicion at all. His wife even said he was a very attentive husband, and they had a son born in 1975 and a daughter in 1978. Next year, in 1979, Dennis actually graduated from university with a degree in administration of justice. However, he still continued his games and wanted to taunt all the authorities. The same year, he actually visited an elderly lady's home, but left before she returned, but not before leaving a letter letting her know that the BTK had visited. At this point, in an effort to try and catch him, the police released the recording of his phone call calling in the homicide in hopes that someone would recognise his voice and they would catch him. And I think this release of his phone call must have scared him off a bit because he didn't strike again, well, not that we know of, for several years after that. In April 1985, he killed his neighbour Marnie Hedge. Her body was found days later on the side of the road, and the following year he then killed Vicky Wergel in her home. His final known victim was Dolores Davis, who was taken from her home in January of 1991. After the killing of Dolores, BTK dropped off the map, and it's known that Dennis strongly focused on his work and family life at this point. He left ADT and in the later 1980s started working as a compliance supervisor in 1991. I think he must have gotten his kick out of being an authoritative person, because he didn't really strike again. He didn't strike again after this. Dolores was his last known victim, but he was very strict on his rules as the compliance supervisor. He would measure the height of his neighbours' grass on their lawns, and he would chase stray animals, shooting at them with a tranquilizer gun. Nothing more was heard of BTK until 2004, and that was just because of the 30th anniversary of the Otoro murders came about. It was posted to lots of news stories, and Dennis decided that this was his time to send several letters filled with items related to his crimes. In these letters, the items included things like a word puzzle, an outline of the BTK story, and he also left packages with clues in them. One of them actually included a computer disk that led authorities to Dennis's church. Investigators, whilst looking at the surveillance cameras, also noticed his Jeep on security tapes of some of the package drop-off areas, and also managed to obtain DNA from his daughter. Of course, with all of this evidence, it led to Dennis being guilty, and he was arrested on the 25th of February 2005. He was charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder, and his neighbours and fellow church members were just as shocked as everyone else by the news. And because he was so good at keeping it a secret, they all knew him as this hard-working, attentive, loving husband and father. And they would never ever have thought he was a serial killer, let alone one that was roaming their streets. On the 27th of June 2005, Dennis pled guilty to all charges. As part of his plea, he gave all the gruesome details of all the crimes that he committed. Many of the observers said that he had no remorse and no emotions, especially whilst relaying all the horrific details of the crimes. However, all of the crimes he did commit were committed before 1994, which is when the reinstatement of the death penalty was put in place. This meant that Dennis wasn't allowed to be given the death penalty, and was sent to El Dorado Correctional Facility to serve his 10 life sentences. He is still alive to this day in prison serving his sentence, but this story really shocked me, just because usually the neighbours or the family notice, that they're a bit withdrawn, or they're acting a little different, or they're not home as much. But in this case, it just seemed that Dennis just had no emotion towards the crimes that he committed, which shows he just deserves to be where he is now. Thank you so much for watching. I'll link all of my socials down in the description box below, and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.